Hi, welcome to What's So Great About Shakespeare. I'm David Bishop, and this is What's So Great About Hamlet, Part 1. I'm going to go through the play and help you get an idea what's going on scene by scene, and I hope as we do that, what's so great about Hamlet is going to begin to appear. Well, we'll see. Hamlet Shakespeare wrote about 1600. Although he'd been working on it for years, there were revisions, it's complicated, but about 1600, the turn of the century, Hamlet was finished. But when Shakespeare first arrived in London about 10, 12 years before, when he was 24 or 25 years old, came in from the countryside, from Stratford, he was arriving in London at a revolutionary moment in history because people were watching plays that were realistic in a way that they had never been before. There was a whole new level of realism reached by these plays, many of them, where you could see characters interacting on the stage who were something like people you might meet in the street. They weren't allegorical study representations of sin or whatever. They were, as people understood at the time, like real people. And when Shakespeare arrived in London, it had only been 10 years or so since the first building had been built in London just for the purpose of showing plays and charging admission. But within that time, that 10, 12 years before Shakespeare arrived, that first theater, which was called the Theater, was joined by a lot of other theaters, the Curtain, the Rose, and eventually the Globe, as groups of people formed these theater companies and got their own theaters. They were sort of like television networks, you might say, that put on different shows. And their popularity was determined by the price of admission, how many people wanted to go see him. So Shakespeare's company, he got together with a group of people who were showing plays, and he started writing plays about 1590 or so. And because of his plays, mainly, this company of his became the number one theater company in London, which means the number one theater company in the world, because nowhere else was there anything like this happening, where all these theaters were going up, showing plays that you could really get involved in. There was drama, there was action, and there were people talking. Well, some of them talked in poetry, but even so, they were recognizable people. It was a great leap forward in people watching stories on the stage about people. And we still watch TV, we watch the movies, we have to get our stories about people from somewhere. So this was really the beginning of that. And about 10 years into it, Shakespeare produced Hamlet. He had written other plays, and they were apprentice works at first, but then he got so good that he started producing these tremendous plays, and Hamlet, probably the best, whatever that means, but certainly the closest to Shakespeare. Hamlet has a lot in common with Shakespeare. And maybe that's one reason it's such a huge play. Shakespeare thought about it, I think, for many years. When he first arrived in London, there was a play being played on the stage called Hamlet. It was a simple revenge play. We don't have a copy of it. It's now called the Hamlet, the primeval Hamlet. Have only a couple of remarks about it by people who wrote about it. One said that the ghost in Hamlet cried like an oyster wife, "Hamlet, revenge!" I don't know who wrote that play. Might have been Shakespeare himself. But all we know is that it doesn't exist anymore, and thinking that Shakespeare himself wrote it as his first juvenile effort might help explain why it doesn't exist anymore. Shakespeare got rid of it. But even if it was written by someone else, Shakespeare could have bought it up and got rid of it to keep it from being confused with his Hamlet, which we now have, which I would call the grown up, the adult, the mature Hamlet. Whereas the first Hamlet of the 1580s was more like a juvenile Hamlet. It was a revenge play, and like a lot of revenge plays, which we still have, revenge movies, we love them, the problem is, how is the revenger going to take revenge? And we're waiting to see him do it. Usually him. But in Hamlet, Hamlet's problem is not only how to take revenge, but whether to take revenge. What exactly he should do. And there are various reasons why it's not that clear what he should do. But let's start off at the beginning. We have a scene that takes place on the battlements of the castle on a platform raised up somewhere on the battlements perhaps, where one sentry is guarding the castle. There are others, no doubt, around other sides of the castle. One sentry is guarding the castle on the platform. The king is inside the castle, the king of Denmark, and this sentry is pacing back and forth the way sentries do. Now, the other sentry, Bernardo, is approaching the platform because he's going to take over from Francisco. He's going to relieve him. And they do this all the time. But this time, as Bernardo approaches, he hears the pacing of the sentry. And he says, "Who's there?" Except it's not that. It's more like, "Who's there?" He's afraid. He's worried. Because he knows that it might not be Francisco. As usual, pacing back and forth, it might be somebody else. We learn a little later that they saw the ghost of the old King Hamlet, who just died recently, pacing in his armor the night before. They don't know what to make of it. They just think that he might come back again tonight. They're scared. And so Bernardo says, "Who's there?" Because he doesn't know if it's Francisco. But Francisco, he says, "Nay, answer me." Meaning, I'm the sentry, I ask that question. "Nay, answer me. Stand and unfold yourself." He wants to know who's coming. And Bernardo says, "Long live the king," which is their common, common identity. They're both there to protect the king and the order of the state, which depends on the king. So when he says, "Long live the king," Francisco says, "Bernardo," and Bernardo says, "He." This is an identity problem solved. Bernardo approaches, he comes up, and he starts to talk to Francisco. But in the meantime, I want to turn back to those early like the words "who's there." You can remember Hamlet if you remember that its first line is "who's there," although it's "who's there? Who's there?" Because that question has an outer meaning here, where you hear it and you go through "Long live the king, Bernardo, he," everything's solved. There's no problem in understanding what's going on. But these questions have a potential inner meaning too. The question "who's there?" for example, is outward. Who's there is Bernardo approaching. But who's there in the course of this play and that question echoes through the whole play, is who is there really inside you or anyone? If you look into your heart, who's there? As Hamlet says at one point, am I a coward? That's one question you could ask when you were trying to figure out who is really there inside you. And then in the second question, nay, answer me, stand and unfold yourself. Unfold yourself. Has any century ever asked that question? Has any human being ever asked that question? I doubt it. Unfold yourself. But we don't have to pause to think about its deeper possibilities because the outward meaning has solved the problem. However, questions like this keep coming up. And so the play has this outer and inner meaning going on all the time. So, Bernardo comes up to the platform where Francisco is waiting, and Bernardo, he. And Francisco says, you come most carefully upon your hour. It's right after midnight. There is no delay. He arrives on time. The time is not out of joint. The time is pretty much in joint in this respect. You come most carefully upon your hour. Things are working. And Bernardo says, yes, tis now struck 12. Get thee to bed, Francisco. And Francisco says, for this relief, much thanks. 'Tis bitter cold, and I am sick at heart. He's sick at heart for the same reason that Bernardo is afraid. Who's there? Because the night before, they saw this ghost, the ghost of old Hamlet, the old king who just died a few months ago, pacing in his suit of armor. What could this mean? And they're scared. I am sick at heart. Have you had quiet guard, Bernardo says, and Francisco says, not a mouse stirring. Now, normally, this would be good news. This is what a sentry approaching wants to hear. Yeah, not a mouse stirring, perfectly quiet guard. Fine, thanks, good night. But here, not a mouse stirring also indicates that Francisco is out there in the cold, sick at heart, worried about the ghost showing up, just like Bernardo is, and there has been no sound at all. Maybe it's too quiet out there. He's been standing there in the total dark, the total quiet, the cold, and he's happy to get out of there and go home to his bed. So not a mouse stirring has that possibility of not being altogether a positive thing. And Bernardo says, well, good night. And he says, if you do meet, when you're going home and you're going down from the platform, if you do meet Horatio and Marcellus, the rivals of my watch, bid them make haste. Rivals is an old word. It's got a different meaning now, like competition. It means something more like the co-arrivals, the co-watchers of my watch, my companions in the watch. If you do meet Horatio and Marcellus, the rivals of my watch, bid them make haste. He doesn't want to be there alone in the cold and dark. Francisco says, I think I hear them. And so they're coming. And Francisco says, stand ho, who is there? That is not who's there. It's who is there. This is a normal sentry's warning and question. Who is there? And Horatio says, friends to this ground. Marcellus adds, and liege men to the Dane. They could say, long live the king. But this is their, identifier, is that they are friends to this ground. They're from Denmark. They're not invaders from Norway, for example. Francisco says, give you good night. Marcellus, the soldier who has come with Horatio, who is a student, Marcellus says, oh, farewell, honest soldier, who hath relieved you? It's pretty dark out there. And Francisco says, Bernardo hath my place. Give you good night. And he leaves. So Marcellus turns and says, hola, Bernardo. And Bernardo says, say, what, is Horatio there? And Horatio says, a piece of him. This, like unfold yourself, or who's there, is something that has an outer meaning which we're going to be okay with. It means he's a little doubtful about whether any ghost would appear. But he says a piece of him. So a person can be divided into parts, into pieces. You can unfold the self of a person and look at the different components of the self. A piece of him. No one has ever said that before, as far as I know. Oh, Horatio, is that you, Horatio? A piece of him. That means that the piece of him that is rational, that knows that there's no such thing as a ghost, he left that back in his room. And the piece of him that thinks, well, maybe there's something, maybe there really is, I don't know, but I'm just going to come and see. That's the piece of Horatio that is there. Bernardo says, welcome, Horatio, welcome, good Marcellus. Horatio says, what has this thing appeared again tonight? They asked him to come up here because they said they'd seen a ghost, and this is what Horatio doesn't want to believe. So only a piece of him has come up to test their story. And Bernardo says, I have seen nothing. Didn't show up so far tonight. Marcellus says, Horatio says, 'tis but our fantasy, and will not let belief take hold of him. Will not let belief take hold of him. Touching this dreaded sight twice seen of us. So apparently last night and the night before the ghost was there. Therefore I have entreated him along with us to watch the minutes of this night, that if again this apparition come, he may approve our eyes and speak to it. And Horatio says, tush, tush, 'twill not appear. That's the skeptical part of Horatio. It's supposed to be back in his room, but he's still skeptical up here on the battlements. Tush, tush, 'twill not appear. And Bernardo says, sit down a while and let us once again assail your ears that are so fortified against our story. What we have 2 nights seen. Assail your ears with our story. Ears, a part of the person, stands in for the person. Well, says Horatio, sit we down and let us hear Bernardo speak of this. Bernardo says, last night of all, just the very last night, night before, when yon same star that's westward from the pole had made his course to illume that part of heaven where now it burns, Marcellus and myself, so Marcellus was there the night before as well, Marcellus and myself, the bell then beating 1, enter ghost. And Marcellus says, peace, break thee off. Look where it comes again. Marcellus outwardly is just saying, stop talking, look, here's the ghost. But peace, break thee off, has an inner meaning as well. And that is that the peace of the kingdom is about to be broken off because of this ghost. And Bernardo says, look where it comes again. Bernardo says, in the same figure like the king that's dead. Marcellus says, "Thou art a scholar. Speak to it, Horatio." Scholars were supposed to be able to speak to ghosts. They were learned. They knew Latin. They knew sort of some secrets of ghosts. Anyway, so he says, okay, thou art a scholar. Speak to it, Horatio. Bernardo says, "Looks it not like the king? Mark it, Horatio." And Horatio says, "Most like. It harrows me with fear and wonder." Bernardo says, "It would be spoke to." Marcellus, "Question it, Horatio." Horatio says, "What art thou that usurpst this time of night, together with that fair and warlike form, in which the majesty of buried Denmark did sometimes march? By heaven, I charge thee, speak. What art thou that usurpst this time of night? That is, your presence is not wanted here, but you're coming in and usurping the time. Together with that fair and warlike form. It's usurping the fair and warlike form of old King Hamlet. So there's the fair and warlike form, and then there's the spirit, or whatever it is, that is usurping it and shouldn't be here. And Marcellus says, "It is offended." Bernardo, "See, it stalks away." Horatio says, "Stay, speak, speak, I charge thee, speak." Marcellus, and then it exits. And Marcellus says, "'Tis gone, and will not answer." Bernardo, "How now, Horatio? You tremble and look pale. Is not this something more than fantasy? What think you on't?" Horatio, "Before my God, I might not this believe without the sensible and true avouch of mine own eyes." His eyes avouch the truth to him. Just like his ears are fortified, they have to be invaded. "Is not this like the king?" says Marcellus. And Horatio says, "As thou art to thyself." A very strange thing to say. A piece of him is here, but as thou art to thyself, it's as close a resemblance as thou art to thyself. How can thou be so removed from thyself that there's a resemblance between them? It's an odd, there's more to resemblance than you might have thought. Such was the very armor he had on when he the ambitious Norway combated. So frowned he once when in an angry parle he smote the sledded Polacs on the ice. 'Tis strange. So we know that he combated with the ambitious Norway, that is, the king of Norway. And he smote the sledded Polacs on the ice. He fought in Poland, and he fought against Poles who, some of them, fought in sleighs, because in the winter it was snow everywhere, so they went around on sleighs. Sledded, on sleds. Marcellus, "Thus twice before, and jump at this dead hour, right at this dead hour, with martial stalk, hath he gone by our watch." Horatio says, "In what particular thought to work I know not, but in the gross and scope of my opinion, this bodes some strange eruption to our state. Like peace, break thee off. Some strange eruption to our state is coming." And Marcellus says, "Good, now sit down and tell me, he that knows, why this same strict and most observant watch so nightly toils the subject of the land. Why are we on watch like this all the time? Strict and most observant watch. And why such daily cast of brazen cannon? They're manufacturing cannons. And foreign mart for implements of war. They're buying weapons from other countries. Why such impressive shipwrights, whose sore task does not divide the Sunday from the week? They're on double shifts, building ships. Why? What might be toward? What's coming? That this sweaty haste doth make the night, joint laborer with the day, who is't that can inform me? So it's not widespread knowledge yet why there seems to be so much preparation for war. And Horatio says, that can I can inform you. At least the whisper goes so. He's going to repeat the rumor, the whisper. Our last king, whose image even but now appeared to us, was, as you know, by Fortinbras of Norway, thereto pricked on by a most emulate pride, dared to the combat, in which our valiant Hamlet, for so this side of our known world esteemed him, did slay this Fortinbras, who by a sealed compact, well ratified by law and heraldry, did forfeit with his life all those his lands which he stood seized of to the conqueror, against the which a moiety competent, an equivalent amount, was wagered, or put up by our king, which had returned to the inheritance of Fortinbras, had he been vanquisher, as by the same covenant and carriage of the article designed, his fell to Hamlet. So this is a pretty strange circumstance here. Fortinbras, king of Norway, very full of pride, challenged Hamlet, king of Denmark, to single combat to determine what happens to these lands that he stood seized of. Now, I see this as kind of a situation where in between the two kingdoms there's these disputed lands, maybe a couple of islands, say. And now and then Norway gets warlike and it takes them over, and then Denmark sometimes swings back the other way. They can't invade each other's countries and conquer each other's countries, too big, but they can dispute these lands, these islands or whatever. And so when Hamlet kills Fortinbras, the king of Norway, they have already agreed, and this is the odd part, they have agreed on a treaty that says whoever wins this single combat, his country gets to keep the other island that's been in dispute all these years. So there's going to be a border set by the treaty, agreed to by everyone, a lawful border between the two countries, and no more dispute over these lands. Well, the whole dispute part comes from, the ancient times, medieval times, when people went around with their swords killing each other. And here you have a combat, two kings in their armor hacking at each other with swords until one of them is dead. Well, from the point of view of soldiers, that's a good thing, because the soldiers don't die. They don't have to fight the war. So this is like a really primitive thing with two men in armor just trying to kill each other. And yet they've agreed on a treaty, signed in law and heraldry and perfectly proper, that says the winner is that king's country gets to keep the disputed lands forever, and the border is set. This is a symbolic moment, a moment in human history when humans go from holding land by force to holding land by law. It is the settling of borders with treaties that are respected on all sides that is the progress of civilization. So we're moving from a lawless land held by force to a lawful land held by law era in human history. Well, it's not all over the world, obviously. I mean, Putin is still in the land held by force mode, and so are a lot of countries around the world. There's still a lot of dispute over borders, but in many places there is no dispute over borders. We already have settled down and made our holding of this land legal and peaceful, more or less. So this moment of established law setting the borders between Denmark and Norway is threatened now, because young Fortinbras, the son of old King Fortinbras, who got killed in this single combat, is threatening to invade Denmark with a private army and take back those lands that his father lost. Well, Fortinbras is 30 years old because he was born when this conflict happened. So it's like 30 years ago, and Fortinbras is just now coming to get together his soldiers, his own private army, and take back those lands. Well, nothing is said here, you should note. Nothing is said about revenge. Fortinbras is not coming to take revenge for his father's death. He can't, because the person who killed his father is dead. He is coming to try and regain lands that were lost in a lawful battle with a treaty signed by both parties. So he is trying to turn the world back from law to force. Well, Fortinbras, the young Fortinbras, is of unimproved, now Sir young Fortinbras, here's what Horatio says, now Sir young Fortinbras of unimproved metal, hot and full. He's a young hothead. He's unimproved, that is uncivilized. He doesn't respect the law. Unimproved metal, hot and full, hath in the skirts of Norway here and there sharked up a list of lawless resolutes, for food and diet to some enterprise that hath a stomach in't, which is no other than, as it doth well appear unto our state, but to recover of us by strong hand and terms compulsatory force those foresaid lands so by his father lost. And this, I take it, is the main motive of our preparations, the source of this our watch, and the chief head of this post-haste and rummage in the land, this, building of ships, this acquiring of weapons, this forging of cannons, all getting ready because Fortinbras, with his lawless resolutes, might attack. And Bernardo says, I think it is no other, but e'en so. Yeah, he's heard this rumor too. Well may it sort. It might tie in with this. Well may it sort that this portentous figure comes armed through our watch, so like the king that was and is the question of these wars. It was the king won the lands, and now Fortinbras is trying to take them back because the king of Denmark killed his father and took the lands. It's not revenge. It's returning to the world of force, losing the world of law, progress, civilization, going backward. And why would he do this? Because he's of unimproved metal, hot and full, and he's collecting all his lawless resolutes, people who don't care about the law, they just want some booty. And Horatio says, a mote it is to trouble the mind's eye. A mote in the mind's eye. Certainly makes us worry, this ghost who's walking back and forth. The mind's eye, I think, is an older idea than Shakespeare, but nevertheless, there it is again. The ears have to be invaded Now, the eyes have to avouch the truth. The mind's eye is troubled by what it sees inside the mind. A mote it is, says Horatio, to trouble the mind's eye. In the most high and palmy state of Rome, a little ere the mightiest Julius fell, before Julius Caesar was killed, the graves stood tenantless, and the sheeted dead did squeak and gibber in the Roman streets, as stars with trains of fire and dews of blood, disasters in the sun, and the moist star, upon whose influence Neptune's empire stands, the moon, which controls the tides, was sick almost to doomsday with eclipse. And even the like precurse of feared events as harbingers preceding still the fates, and prologue to the omen coming on, have heaven and earth together demonstrated unto our climatures and countrymen. Meaning there have been, weird astronomical signs that the astrologers are saying, something's going to happen, something bad's going to happen. So there's rumors and there's predictions, but people really don't know what's happening. It's a mote to trouble the mind's eye. They don't quite know what to make of it all. And at this moment, the ghost enters. Again, the ghost comes back. But soft, behold, lo, where it comes again. I'll cross it, though it blast me, says Horatio. The ghost spreads its arms, and Horatio says, stay, illusion, stay, illusion. If thou hast any sound or use of voice, speak to me. If there be any good thing to be done that may to thee do ease and grace to me, speak to me. If thou art privy to thy country's fate, which happily foreknowing may avoid, speak. Yeah, you know the country's fate, and because you know the fate, you can avoid it. So then it wouldn't be fate. What is fate? Another of the curious questions that circulate in the air. Or if thou hast uphoarded in thy life extorted treasure in the womb of earth, for which they say your spirits oft walk in death, speak of it, stay and speak. Well, as we'll find out, treasure has nothing to do with it. The cock crows. Stop it, Marcellus. It's starting to move off. Shall I strike at it with my partisan? Do, if it will not stand. 'Tis here, Bernardo. Horatio, 'tis here. Marcellus, 'tis gone. They try to strike it, but they can't hit it. You can't stab a ghost. Marcellus, 'tis gone. We do it wrong, being so majestical to offer it the show of violence. For it is as the air, invulnerable, and our vain blows malicious mockery. Bernardo says, it was about to speak when the cock crew. Horatio, and then it started like a guilty thing upon a fearful summons. I have heard, rumor again, I have heard the cock, that is the trumpet to the morn, doth with his lofty and shrill-sounding throat awake the god of day, and at his warning, whether in sea or fire, in earth or air, the extravagant and erring, wandering spirit hies to his confine. The ghost has to get back. When the dawn comes, the ghost has to get out of there, go back into the grave or wherever. Hies to his confine, and of the truth herein, this present object made probation. Marcellus says, it faded on the crowing of the cock. I think that's a sort of a dry response. I mean, I think Marcellus is saying, well, I'll give you this. It faded on the crowing of the cock. But as for this, the spirit's high to his confine, Marcellus is not going there. He doesn't know. The fact that Marcellus the soldier is accepting is that it faded on the crowing of the cock. The announcement of dawn, the ghost disappears. And Marcellus goes on, some say, and Marcellus is going to give us another set of rumors. Some say that ever against that season comes wherein our Savior's birth is celebrated. So this is Christmas, around Christmas. This bird of dawning, the cock, singeth all night long. And then, they say, no spirit dare stir abroad. No ghosts are wandering. No spirit dare stir abroad. The nights are wholesome. Then no planets strike, no astrological signs. No fairy takes. Fairies would go in and steal babies from their cribs and take them away. But they don't do it around Christmas time. No fairy takes, nor witch hath power to charm. So hallowed and so gracious is that time. And Horatio replies, so have I heard, and do in part believe it. How do you believe something in part? With a piece of you? So have I, this is all rumor, that, so have I heard and do in part believe it. And they don't know. I mean, these are all just a lot of folk beliefs that are just in the air circulating. Belief in astrology, belief in fairies, belief in witches, and belief in Jesus, in God. But in the hallowed and gracious period of Christmas, the witches hold back, the fairies hold back. They're still there. After Christmas, they come right back and start threatening us again. So this is a world in which many rumors and beliefs are circulating, and people hear them and they in part believe them, or they don't know. Religion is in the mix, stirred in along with the belief in witches, fairies, who knows what's happening. And Horatio says, so have I heard that they hold off at Christmas time. So have I heard and do in part believe it. But look, the morn in russet mantle clad walks o'er the dew of yon high eastward hill. Shakespeare creates the scene, even though it's an afternoon outdoors with the sun shining. He says, the morn in russet mantle clad walks o'er the dew of yon high eastward hill. Break we our watch up, and by my advice, let us impart what we have seen tonight unto young Hamlet. We're going to meet young Hamlet. Young Hamlet, the son of old Hamlet, the king who died after 30 years ago killing old Fortinbras, the king of Norway. That Hamlet is the father of young Hamlet, who is the Prince of Denmark, whose tragical history this is. Let us impart what we have seen tonight unto young Hamlet, for upon my life this spirit, dumb to us, will speak to him. Do you consent we shall acquaint him with it, as needful in our loves, fitting our duty? Marcella says, let's do it, I pray, and I this morning know where we shall find him most convenient. And they exit to go off and find Hamlet and tell him about the ghost. They don't say, let's go tell the king. Maybe they just haven't got the status to go up to the king and say, but Horatio is a friend of Hamlet. And so Hamlet, if he accepts their story, could then report it to the king, because after all, he is the prince. So they want to go and tell Hamlet about this ghost, apparently of his father, they saw walking. And so, scene 1 ends. See you for scene 2. Bye.